So this is the River Teviot, which is a tributary of the Tweed. It flows through Hawick, and we will be taking our cooling water and our process water from the river straight into the distillery, which you can see on the other side of the road. These are the steel structures coming in for the back of the distillery that we're going to show you in a moment. This is the building of the distillery happening live as we speak. The sheds behind were built in 1888, and the building in front that you can see was built in 1901. The whole site started life as the Hawick Electric Company, an Irish company that raised capital in London and invested in an electric renewable energy business in Hawick. So what you're seeing here on the right-hand side is an empty space which will eventually become our renewable energy project. The concrete slab in front of you, if you can imagine two tall grain silos being erected there, each one carrying 32 tons. And from there we'll go to the mill, which is the start of the whiskey making process. So this is where the process starts. Closest to you on the camera is where the mash tun is going. We empty 5 tons of malted barley into the mash tun, treat it 3 times with water, and then pass it down the hole into 8 fermenters where we make the beer. At the end of the process, we will have liquid called wort, which is about 7 to 8 degrees alcohol. As you can see, on the left-hand side of the wall are the holes that were built in the 1890s for the belt drives when the water engine, which made the electricity, was in this building. At the far end, you can see a crane, which dates back to the 1930s, which we are retaining for historical interest. And where possible, we're preserving the original trusses, the original roof, so that the history of the building will always be part of its future. As part of the theme of making the history building part of our future, where we've had to strip away the old rock, we've infilled with old brick to make it look as though the new windows and the new dynamic in this old building are all evolutionary. If you can imagine, at 3.6 meters, there will be a steel mezzanine floor. So the working part of the distillery will be underneath, and visitors and customers will come on, walk through those windows, along this wall, and go through the gap up there into the still house. In terms of process, we finish fermenting the beer at this end, and then we move it through the big door into the still house, all moving in a continuous U-shape. So this moves you into the still house now. On the other side of the wall, there will be 2 wash stills, 2 pot stills, made for us by Fordyce in Rothes. And then in the middle, opposite the pot stills, will be the Carter Head gin still, a still that was made to our own design.
John has given you a quick tour of what will become the new Borders Distillery, and we'll begin distilling later this year in August 2017. The building of the distillery is the backbone to our project. This will be the first single malt whisky distillery in the Borders for 180 years. Back in the day, most of the single malt distilleries in Scotland were actually located in the Borders. Then the English created excise and sent the nasty excise man up on horseback to collect duties from all the distilleries. One by one, the Scots closed and moved their distilleries to the more remote and inaccessible highlands and islands. The last distillery closed in 1837, and we are bringing back distilling to the Borders after 180 years.
The first whisky created by the Three Stills Company was Clan Fraser. It's a blended Scotch which we've named after a famous Scottish clan, the Frasers. They came to Scotland in the 12th century from France. Their name originally was Fraisier, which means strawberries, and they were involved in the strawberry business. Still today, outside Hawick, at the top of Loch Fruid, you can find Strawberry Hill and the ruins of the Castle Oliver, where they eventually settled.
Lower East Side is the Americanised geographical description for the location of our distillery in Scotland. It also happens to be just about the coolest spot in Manhattan for a good night out. Hundreds of bars, clubs and restaurants. The brand has all the advantages of strong Scottish provenance and heritage, and it is 100% a malt whisky. And this is mixed in with all the cool Bourbonesque imagery of Americana, New York, Manhattan. It is not a single malt, but it's a blended malt. This means that it is 100% malt whisky, but the liquids derive from several different single malt whisky distilleries. Lower East Side is in Manhattan, so the new perfect Manhattan surely has to have Lower East Side as a fundamental ingredient. But the liquid is also fantastic just on its own, or with a drop of water, or over ice. Lower East Side. Made in Scotland, at home in a Manhattan. Slanjivar.
So here we are, some 5 months on from our last update. As you can see, there are two 32-ton silos that have been installed. The cereal will come in from the borders, it'll be blown up those pipes and then come back out the bottom. And if you walk through here, you'll be able to see where the mill is going to be. This is the mill receiving bin. There will be a barley mill here where we'll make the grist, which goes into the mash tun, which we've installed, which is fed by hot water from these two hot liquor tanks. So we mash the barley in here. That mashing the barley means washing it through with water 3 times to produce a sugary liquid, which we then pass over to 8 fermentation tanks, which occupy the rest of the hall, and we leave the sugary liquid to ferment in here for up to 56 hours. We've now got fully prepared floor, we've renovated the roof, reworked the sarking, reworked the glass, reworked the tiling, and we've started the installation process for our stills. These 2 large ones are wash stills, which is the first process in distillation, and then to your left you have 2 smaller stills, which is for the second process, spirit distillation, and behind you you can see the receiving tanks where we manipulate the liquid from one still to another still to make sure we get the best quality at the end of the process. At the far end of the building you can see our receiving tank. That's where the final whisky ends up before it's moved off to our warehouses for storage. The hoist we've renovated, it still works, it will run the full length of the building, and this is all part of our ethos of making sure that the history of the building is reflected in its future use and that the public recognise it for what it was. At the top of these steel stanchions there will be a mezzanine floor, so the public will be able to come in, circulate around the distillery at 3.6 metres above the floor and end up over in the visitor centre for a dram and an explanation of our process. This is the last condenser to be installed on the number 1 mash. Just over there is the line arm, and if you look up over to the top of the still you can see how they fit onto the main body of the still. Condenser vertical, line arm horizontal. So we built this wee office with a view of the still hall for the night shift essentially. Night shifts can feel a bit lonely, but the work has to carry on. So by creating this office within the workspace, we hope that we'll make the staff feel better about being on the long night shift. Welcome to part 3 of these short films about the development of the new Borders Distillery. What you can see now in the images is all the equipment has been installed, and bit by bit we're bringing the building back to life. So we start off in the mash hall, and you can see on both left-hand sides stainless steel fermenters where we make the beer, which eventually becomes whiskey. As we walk down the hall, we come to a place where we mix Borders cereal with water drawn from a borehole 17 metres underneath the factory. We mix the water with the cereal, extract all the sugar with hot water, and then we ferment it with yeast to make beer. As we go around the corner, we come into the still house where we have double distillation process. At the top end there are wash stills, which is where we put the beer, we boil it up, and we get a 31% ABV spirit. We then store it in an intermediate storage tank, and then we pump it into the spirit stills for a second distillation. And after that distillation, we move the spirit off-site to our maturation centre where we mature the liquid in oak casks for a minimum of 3 years. The other still you can see, which goes from the floor all the way up to the ceiling, is our gin factory. So we take a percentage of our spirit that we would have sent to maturation, and we redistill it in this special Carter head still, which is built for this distillery. And we use a combination of Asian and Scottish botanicals to make a new gin, which will be launching in June. We maintain the ambition that all of our barley comes from the Borders, all of our co-products are used in the Borders, and everything we sell from here is in the Borders to try and give visitors to Hawick a really good experience.